conspiracy theory, and the paranormal meet. And now, we join the show already in progress with your hosts, Adam, Seraphiel, and Rob.
We got Wren Collier, guys, and we're talking about Ordo Templi Orientis. I think I said that right.
That's right.
Ordo Templi Orientis, yeah, the OTO, and that's what will be the focus of this show. Wren is a member of a lodge up there, which we've kind of skirted around a lot of this stuff in the previous interviews that we've done with you. Mm-hmm. But we never really sat down and talk about it, so that's kind of why I wanted to get you on. And you're actually missing Lodge Night tonight to come on and do this show. So
yeah, I go every Tuesday. So yeah, I'm a Minerval in the OTO. I got initiated earlier this year, and I've been going to the Leaping Laughter Oasis, which is the OTO lodge here in Minneapolis, for a little over a year now. I think I originally found out about it because I was listening to an episode of Alexander F's excellent podcast, Glitch Bottle, and he was talking to Dr. Joe Peterson. And Joseph Peterson mentioned something about some book he was researching. And the university library he mentioned getting it from, it was like the University of St. Thomas, I think. And I was like, wait, that's in Minneapolis. Is he in Minneapolis? And I looked it up, and sure enough, Joe Peterson's in Minneapolis. And then I found out that he mentioned Sleeping Laughter. And I was like, what is that? So I Googled it. And I was like, oh, there's like an OTO lodge here. And I looked at the calendar, and it had on the calendar every Tuesday night ritual workshop. And it said, come learn to be a magician, practice rituals and that kind of stuff. So I didn't go for a long time. It was several months before I sort of worked up the nerve to go. And I was really happy in that everyone there was like super friendly and nice. And that's where I met my current mentor, Scott Stenwick, he's been doing the ritual night for years now. So every Tuesday he's up there. And I learned more in sort of the first year of being there and actually having like a mentor, actually having like real magicians to talk to and bounce things off of than I did in like years of just private study. Because it's kind of like Fight Club. Like the only rule of ritual night is that everyone has to do a ritual. If you go, you got to do something. Even if it's just doing like the LBRP, the Lesser Banishing Ritual to Pentagram, which is like the first thing Scott teaches. And so there's sort of like, it's a revolving door. Sort of there's people that come and then they go. Some of the people that were going when I first started going, I haven't seen in months. Some people just drop off the face of the earth. But there is a core group of like me and Scott and some other people up there who are regulars. And it's been nice because at least the regular people, assuming it's a night when there's like no new people or no, just like sometimes you just get like curious people will come. Since we're all sort of advanced now and we've all learned all the basic stuff that Scott has to teach, we started doing more advanced stuff. So like we recently started getting into Enochian magic, which has been really interesting and wild.
Okay. Now, is Enochian, is it an essential part of the OTO?
No, and that's something we were talking about before the call. But yeah, a lot of the ritual night stuff that Scott does, because Leaping Laughter is made up of so many practicing magicians, like Harper Feist, Brother Rufus Opus.
Oh
even.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Actually, I think we're
3 times in a row.
I think actually I'm friends with on Facebook with that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, Josh Gadbois.
Yeah, that's him.
Name, yeah. And there's several other people. Like I said, I don't think Joe Peterson is actually a Thelemite, but he's done talks there. So recently Lon Milo Duquette came up and hung out with us.
Yeah, he was here in Nashville not too long ago.
Yeah, he's got a
And
new book out. That
I
he's
got
doing a
to
tour.
I got to meet him in Minneapolis when I went to that last Paradigm Symposium.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's hilarious. Like, I loved hanging out with him. I got him to like sign one of his books for me, and he kept intentionally misspelling my name.
Well, he comes from like, he comes from a very, I guess he's in his 70s now, but he comes from, so he came of age like into the time of the hippie counterculture.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah, he's
I
definitely
guess,
like an old hippie.
did he, I mean, I guess that some of this stuff really, this OTO stuff, because people really, I mean, we're going to talk a lot about Crowley, of course, although the OTO wasn't originally founded by Crowley, which I did not know until very recently. But, and we'll talk about all that too. But, I guess that during the 60s, then the counterculture really kind of rediscovered Crowley and all his like teachings, because you got Crowley on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and all that kind of stuff that was going on.
Yeah, you sort of had, I guess, like a magical revival in the 70s that Crowley was a part of. That was also sort of the start of what we now know as like Wicca. Was brought over here by Gerald Gardner and got really popular. But yeah, just to finish my original point about the ritual night thing and the like magic and the lodge.
Yeah.
So the lodge does do sort of, I guess, religious Thelemic stuff, which is sort of the main focus of the OTO. It's like a fraternal organization, right, with an ecclesiastical like component in the official, I guess, church of Thelema, which is the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. So like they do Gnostic Mass every Sunday. Sometimes do it on Mondays. Which, if listeners have never been to a Gnostic Mass, it's really fun. It's cool. It's interesting. So if you got a local body, go to Gnostic Mass. It's cool. It's not like a Catholic Mass. You don't have to convert to take communion. It's pretty cool. But so the magic stuff, the Enochian, the Goetic work, the spirit work, all the different type of magical stuff we do up there isn't necessarily related to the OTO. It's just a byproduct of there being so many practicing magicians who are members of the lodge. So like Scott, my mentor, he's written several books on Enochian stuff like Mastering the Magical Heptarchy. And that's sort of his specialty is specifically like angel magic and Enochian magic. And so that's kind of what he teaches us. There are some specifically Thelemic rituals that we learn, like Liber Reguli or the Star Ruby and the Star Sapphire. But for the most part, our sort of instruction there encompasses the entirety of Western occultism. And yeah, it's not directly related. It's sort of like I guess we may talk about this later, but the AA, like the what is it, Astrum Argentum or whatever, the Silver Star. The AA is like technically sort of it's not technically related to the OTO, but they like are partnered with the OTO. They were both founded by Crowley.
Right.
And the AA is sort of like the magical version of the OTO, I guess. I mean, people will probably skin me alive for saying that, but like, come on. It was sort of a successor organization to the Golden Dawn, but it is inexorably linked to the OTO, right? A lot of people who are in the OTO are also members of the AA. But to join the AA, it's a lot more complicated. Like you have to actually know someone who's in the AA. You have to take instruction from them personally. You can't do it over the internet. But a lot of the stuff that Scott teaches us is sort of AA type material, but without all the sort of trapping and gatekeeping that comes along with the official AA. And the AA is a whole other thing too, because there's all this like drama going on with the AA about like there's multiple AAs and like people argue over which AA is the correct like AA and who's the actual successor. And Scott explained it to me one time and it just made my head spin because it's like all politics and stuff, and I'm just like, who gives a crap about this? Because it's like it's like King of the Jungle Gym kind of stuff. It's
doesn't all that really come from Crowley kind of leaving he just kind of left a void and didn't have a formal system of succession? Isn't that what really happened?
Yeah, with the AA specifically, yeah. He never really named a successor. Or maybe he did, I can't remember. It's something like either he didn't leave a successor or the person he left as a successor didn't leave a successor. I think it was the latter there, because I think he kind of named Frater Ashad as his successor, and then Ashad kind of like gave up all of the Thelemic stuff and became like a Christian, and didn't really name a successor or anything. And then you sort of have these two competing factions where one side says, no, this is the true line of succession, and the other side says, this is the true line. And it's kind of disappointing, because at least in theory, the AA was supposed to fix and remedy a lot of the problems that the Golden Dawn had.
Right. Yeah.
Specifically, like the petty infighting and drama.
Yeah. That didn't work out too well, did it?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, like, in the AA, you're supposed to be secret. Like, you're only supposed to know, like, your immediate, like, contact. It's sort of like that whole, like, you only know the guy one step ahead of you, and no one else. But then Crowley also says that every member of the AA should make themselves publicly known, like, as a member of the AA. So it's like, well, which is it, dude? Because can't really do one and do the other too. So
now how is the Typhonian order linked up to all this?
So the Typhonian stuff, I don't know a ton about, other than thinking it's super cool. And like, I really like what like little Kenneth Grant I've been able to read. It's sort of hard to track down his books, and I'm terrible at reading on a computer screen.
Interlibrary loan, my brother.
Yeah, I need to look into that. I keep looking on eBay and like Amazon when I try to find some stuff for cheap. I've seen a couple that are not too bad, but Kenneth Grant's whole thing, I think, was that he sort of wanted to create his own sort of Aeon, or he was naming his own like the Aeon of Set or whatever. He's got his own ideas about sort of the purpose of, I guess, the magical system involved in Thelema. Like he kind of went full bore with this stuff that Crowley said sort of late in his life about how the main aim of magic was communication with extra, let's just use the phrase extraterrestrial entities.
Right.
But that I don't necessarily mean space aliens, but I think your listeners are smart enough to figure it out.
Sure.
But Grant he goes whole hog with that. So he's like, yeah, the whole aim of magic, the whole aim of the Typhonian order is like to contact these, beings from beyond the stars. But he also wraps it in this whole like Lovecraftian kind of mythos and stuff. Like he sort of treats Lovecraft as like some like like the Necronomicon as if it were like a historical document, and ties in all that stuff. And it's interesting because it's very tied up in like pulp sci-fi kind of stuff in a similar fashion to the way Poke Runyon's OTA, the Ordo Temple of Astarte, it's very wrapped up in like pulp sci-fi and Shaver mystery and Hollow Earth stuff.
Really?
Yeah, he's a big fan of like pulp sci-fi. And so is Grant. So, yeah. But Grant was he was like Crowley's. I think he was Crowley's secretary for a little brief period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But Grant sort of styled himself as this. That's kind of the problem. I've talked a little bit about this with Tim Renner and his show. One of the issues with Thelema and the OTO in general is that what you said is totally right. Like Crowley sort of didn't really leave a successor. There was Ashad, but Ashad kind of went off and did his own thing. Jack Parsons could have been a successor to Crowley, but he blew himself up or got blown up, depending on which version of the story.
Sure. Right.
So it was, there is a void left there that was never really filled by anyone. I guess was it Grady McMurtry or whatever, when he reformed the OTO later, because there was a brief period of time after what was his name died. Oh yeah, so like Carl Germer, after Crowley died. Yeah, Germer sort of led the OTO for a little while after Crowley died. And then he
in America too, right?
Yeah, in America, yeah. But the problem was, I mean, during World War II, the OTO's presence in Europe was pretty much deleted. Because the Nazis didn't, while privately, the Nazis were into the occult. Publicly, they weren't.
And it has very continental European roots.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about the history of the OTO a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We'll
Yeah.
just kind of go full circle and start with really where it came from and some of the figures in this magical history that started it before Crowley kind of had a lasting impact that changed it forever.
Yeah. So like kind of originally the OTO was kind of a quasi Masonic thing. It was basically this guy wanted to basically make like a German Masonic lodge. So it was Theodor Reuss, Karl Kellner. They created the OTO in 1895, and I've heard it described this way, and I think it's really funny, but it's also kind of true. The original incarnation of the OTO is basically a Masonic lodge and swingers club for gay German guys.
Yeah.
For the most part, that's what it was. I mean, it was a way for like gay German guys to hook up in a culture that, like, you know, you could get in serious trouble for being gay in. So, and it was controversial with other Masonic lodges because of these things. Like, there were apparently like kind of like homosexual elements within the initiatory rites and things like that. But it's not actually super interesting until Crowley gets involved with it. So Reuss meets Allister Crowley in 1910 and admits him to the first 3 degrees. And within like 2 years, Crowley is promoted to like the 10th degree. He's made like Prince of Holy King of Ireland or something. Like, God, I mean, God knows what he did. Or either Reuss really, really liked him, or Crowley. I mean, Crowley was a charismatic guy. So, but I mean, he just immediately shoots up to the top of it. But what really happens is, I mean, there's a lot of stuff kind of in between, but what really happens is that Crowley basically cuts everyone out of the OTO as it exists. Like, Reuss has a stroke, and like the relationship between him and Crowley starts to really deteriorate. And in a way, it's very similar to sort of what happened after Crowley got involved with the Golden Dawn. I get the feeling that what he tried to do with this takeover of the Golden Dawn, or at least he attempted to take it over, but sort of ultimately failed. I mean, the Golden Dawn eventually self-imploded anyway. But he was successful in sort of taking over the OTO, and he sort of made it to his own thing. Like, he wrote the Gnostic Mass. He, created the Book of the Law. He developed his ideas about Thelema and will, and he sort of made the OTO less a Masonic lodge thing, more into a fraternal organization based around his own personal ideology. Now,
did the one in Germany, did it kind of still stay kind of pure, or did Crowley just take over the whole thing?
He kind of just took over the whole thing.
Okay.
But the problem was, like I said, during World War II, basically it was driven underground.
Yeah.
Especially in like Germany and stuff. And the only real OTO body that existed during this period after and during World War II was the Agape Lodge in California, which, Jack Parsons was a member of. So Crowley was, I can't remember if Crowley ever actually visited the Agape Lodge, but he was like writing letters to them and stuff.
Right. Yeah, I know him and Parsons had a correspondence together. Yeah.
Yeah. So Crowley sort of led them from the outside. But in a lot of ways, yeah, I mean, the United States community, occult community, sort of saved the OTO. But even then, after Crowley's death, it still sort of fell apart because, he didn't really have there was no clear succession because all the successors sort of either failed or went and did their own thing or died.
And so before Crowley really came along, though, the bulk of the actual work in the OTO was they purchased the rite of Memphis Miserum, right, and then also the Swedenborg rite.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then they also, I guess, Reuss was also involved in. He tried to create a college of the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia in Germany. So you also have the probably most important Rosicrucian order at the time as well, involved with the OTO.
And that was from his involvement with Westcott, I guess.
So isn't that kind of like a lasting influence of Cagliostro also? Because isn't Cagliostro primarily responsible for the rite of Memphis and Mizraim?
I mean, isn't that apocryphal?
Right.
Though. So yeah, I mean, I guess. Although I'm not actually like super up on Masonry, so you probably know more about that than I do.
But just in that, there's like the OTO is kind of like it's carrying some of these more obscure Masonic traditions that probably would have been lost otherwise, it seems like.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's still heavily influenced by Masonry, even down to the design of the temple, the way things are set up, the initiations themselves. Crowley borrowed a lot from Masonry for it, and so there's still like a lot of Masonic imagery and symbolism. It's not like, just to be clear, it's not like Freemasonry, but it's from the same heritage, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess at one time, some would have considered it to be an official body, right? But there was a lot of dispute, and others would say that it was irregular.
Yeah. That was kind of the problem. I think other Masonic organizations didn't like the OTO because it sort of had its own thing. It was kind of doing its own thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that.
Though, and it was men and women, right?
Yeah. That's the one big thing. Yeah, the OTO doesn't restrict based on gender at all. So, as far as I know, women have always been allowed in the OTO. I could be wrong on that, but that is a big difference when you get in Freemasonry, where women aren't allowed.
Cool. So then,
allowing the girls to the boys' club.
Yeah.
So then Crowley comes along and pretty much, I mean, he pretty much just takes over.
Yeah, he kind of takes over and makes it his own organization.
And so can you kind of elaborate on that and how Thelema itself really starts? And that's with, I guess, with the Book of the Law, right?
Yeah, so Crowley, I'm trying to remember when the Book of the Law was written. It was like
1904, I think is what.
04, 05.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1904.
Is that the one that he
04
writes,
04,
or basically transmitted to him in the pyramid?
In the King's Chamber?
Is that the one?
Well, he wasn't actually in the King's Chamber when he did do some stuff and rituals and stuff in the King's Chamber. He apparently made the sylphs appear, or so he says.
Uh-huh.
But the actual writing of the Book of the Law happened in his hotel room in Cairo, basically over the course of 3 days. So he wrote pretty much nonstop for 3 days. Apparently this book it's considered like a channeled text. So it's a book that was dictated to him by this entity named Aiwass, who basically laid out a sort of philosophy and ideology based around a person's will. Like the basic tenet of Thelema, like the thing is, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Right.
With this idea being that every human being has the right to live their life like as they choose, and has the ability to like self-actualize basically. And so he develops his theories about Thelema, or has transmitted them by Aiwass, and puts it into the Book of the Law. And I think it wasn't until, because he didn't join the OTO until 1910. So he had kind of already had the Book of the Law and this other stuff before then. But he started to incorporate elements of Thelema sort of after he took over the OTO.
And that the essence of the law, do it thou wilt, shall be the whole law. Love is law, love under will. It seems real, like it strikes people as being like, oh, that just means do whatever you want, etc. But but really, when you look into it, it's so ingrained in our culture now. It's basically just the idea of finding your purpose, finding your true will, or what you're supposed to be doing in life, and we just totally take that for granted. But
yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean go out and just kill people.
No,
which is, I think, a misconception you'll get for like the more Christian fundamentalist crowd.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so let me break this down for people. So
Please, yeah.
So like, my girlfriend's currently editing a book right now on sort of Wicca stuff, and it brings up that whole statement that a lot of people are familiar with, where it's like, and it do no harm, do what thou wilt, which is just something Gardner just like stole from Crowley when he developed Wicca. He just decided to add that little thing at the beginning to make it very milquetoast and limp-wristed. But like, and do no harm is like implicit in the instructions, because it's not just do what thou wilt, it's that do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, meaning that there is a law, and the only law is do what thou wilt. But if you do something that denies another person their will, like say murder them, then you're breaking the law, because it's their right to do what thou wilt as well as it is your right.
So it's like that cancels it out, essentially, that, you know, that whole concept.
Yeah, like if you do something to deny someone else their will, then you are not following the law. Like you are not adhering to the law of Thelema. And I see, you know, I see do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law as sort of a resounding like statement of like freedom. You know, it's like everyone should be free to live their life how they choose, to pursue their interests, to be creative, to love who they want, to say what they want. It's like a statement. I mean, it's ideas that were enshrined in some form or another in our own country's, you know, Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, it's totally life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, exactly. That's what do what thou wilt really is. It's not be a total asshat and hurt and other people and do whatever you want to do. It is a statement that everyone has the right to be who they want to be. And like as a Thelemite, like I feel like it's my responsibility to make the world like a better place where people can realize their true will. Because how can the law of Thelema is supposed to be for everyone, for every human being in existence. So how can people realize their true will? How can they realize, you know, how can they do what they want to wilt if there are things like poverty and racism and oppression? Like all of these things prevent people from pursuing their true will. And so if we want to live in a world, if like we want to live in the Aeon of Horus, as Crowley called it, as sort of the successor to the Aeon of Osiris, which is the paradigm that the Abrahamic religions formed, we have to make the world like a better, more equitable place.
But Crowley being really a product of his upbringing, and in the Book of the Law, there is some real kind of like elitist sentiment I felt from it. It did definitely strike against, collectivism and things like that. So how do you kind of reconcile that though?
So yeah, you're right. It is part of his upbringing. He was a Victorian English.
Yeah, he was very much a man of his class.
Yeah. But I do. A lot of people bring up that line, "and the slaves shall serve." But my interpretation of that line is that like we, like Thelemites, everyone, we all are the slaves, right? So it's your job to serve other human beings. It's your job to serve like humanity in order to realize the law of Thelema for everyone. So I don't see it as some people see it as like, oh well, you know, the Thelemites will rule the world and then the Christians are going to be our slaves or something. That's not how I see it at all. Like I see us as the slaves.
I could see it too as just meaning that people who have the opportunity, who don't want to follow their will, are just going to do what they're doing already.
Yeah, they're going to serve the interests of others.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to serve the interests of corporations, of capitalists. Like they're going to serve everything but themselves.
So what was the influence of the Golden Dawn on the OTO in Crowley? I know the Enochian magic really was preserved, I guess, and elaborated by the Golden Dawn. They were kind of the keepers of Dee's tradition, right? And then Crowley kind of took that and continued it in his work and brought it into the OTO. Am I right about that, or?
I don't know if he brought it so much into the OTO because like I said earlier, the OTO isn't technically like a magical order.
But into his work, he did a lot
into
with
his own work for sure, yeah, because that's where you get like the callings of the Aethers or whatever that come in. And that the D stuff is a little weird because the Golden Dawn took a lot of liberties with D's material as well and kind of developed it and made it their own, which a lot of the Western magical tradition stuff is created pretty much whole cloth by the Golden Dawn, like things like the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. It has no historical basis. It's just, it was created by the Golden Dawn to use. And it uses like, symbology and stuff that has meaning, but it's not like, you're not going to find it in the grimoire from, medieval France. But yeah, I mean, you saw them, at least some people within the Golden Dawn, become fascinated by Dee's work. And you see other elements of the grimoire tradition make their way into Crowley's work as well, because him and Mathers were responsible for, I guess, the most popular version of the Goetia that came out. It's a pretty bad version of the Goetia because Crowley has this really snotty like intro to it, and Mathers made a lot of like translation errors and things in it. If you ever really want to get like, by the way, if you're a listener and you want to get like a good sort of catty history of the Golden Dawn, there's a book called The Magicians of the Golden Dawn that is kind of like a good history of it. And especially kind of goes into the character of Mathers, who is kind of a scoundrel. It was funny how you saw Mathers sort of become what Crowley was later in life, like sort of a withered, kind of, I don't know, like tragic figure, having to beg people for money, sort of going behind people's backs and betraying people. I don't think Crowley was as bad as Mathers, because Mathers got really bad in his waning twilight years. But a lot of they took a lot of the stuff that was floating around at the time, like from the sort of grimoire tradition, from Dee's work, and they sort of tried to syncretize it with a lot of the Eastern philosophy, I guess you'd say.
And that's when it's first coming to the West, really.
Yeah, through like the Theosophical Society and Madame Blavatsky. So you sort of have this big Oriental influence.
Trying to just kind of combine all this stuff together that's just kind of pouring on in from every different place. Yeah,
because it's the edge of colonialism too. So you have a lot of like these, English guys coming back from India. They're over there for a little while. And
going native, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They go native. They come back. They wear turbans all the time. Drink gin and tonics. But yeah, so you see a lot of that tied into it. But it is interesting in the fact that like, for all of the faults of like the Golden Dawn's material, and like think what you want about the Golden Dawn ritual material. Like I personally don't have a huge problem with it. I use Golden Dawn rituals in my daily work. Like I'm fine with it. But it does bring back an element of energy work that is pretty absent in Western occultism, both Arabic and sort of medieval European occultism. A lot of Western occultism relies very heavily on occult virtues. So like the occult properties of, say, like stones, minerals, herbs, animals, the stars. There's like a heavy astrological influence. But it pretty much lacks any sort of, I guess, coherent theory about the energy circulating in the human body, which is exactly how like Taoism or Taoism works. In like Taoism, it's really interesting. There's a book called like the Altar, the Taoist Altar, something like that, the Altar of Taoism, that I've been reading through, and what I'm realizing is like, Taoism is like it's basically the Western magical tradition with like an energy element, because you have like the whole qigong element to it.
Yeah.
But there's so many rituals that are very similar. There's like setting up of magical fields. There's using black mirrors and scrying. There's like magical weapons. There's like so much that you can look at and say, okay, like Western magic and this had some sort of common ancestor. But Taoism never lost the energy side of things too. And it's still a living tradition, which is not the Western occult tradition is not a living tradition. It's a fragmented, like broken system that has had to restart multiple times. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to be a real magician, just go be a Taoist.
Right.
Yeah, I think a few of those guys
have
kind
become
of
Taoists,
figured that out, as well, right? Very early on, that if you had to really go, like I watched this documentary about Crowley, and there was one of his associates, I don't remember his name, but this guy, I mean, he got fairly serious into Buddhism. Like he just became a Buddhist monk, and I think you know who I'm probably talking about, but definitely just as a starting off point with Western occultism, and some of these guys really just went they went to the source, which was mixed in with all this Eastern mysticism.
Yeah. And then again, like we mentioned, a lot of the Eastern mysticism was being brought over to England and filtered through the lens of Westerners. And so it gets mutated into sort of what becomes the Golden Dawn. Like, I mean, we still, like, even still in the West, like, we use the term feng shui, but we don't really know
what it means.
Like, it means. Yeah, it doesn't, like, what we think of feng shui is not what a Taoist would think of as feng shui.
Right.
So Crowley's whole purpose in having to establish this new law was because he felt we were coming into a new age, right? The Age of Horus.
Yeah, the Aeon of Horus. It sort of believed in this idea that the history of the world is divided into like sort of aeons, or these vast spans of time. Originally, there was the Aeon of sort of Isis, represented by maternal, like mother goddesses, that sort of tradition. And then you have that followed up by the Aeon of Osiris, which is primarily built around religions that center upon this concept of death and rebirth. Because, as Egyptian mythology nerds will know, Osiris was killed and then reborn. And so you sort of have the Abrahamic religions as being the, what's the right word? Sort of the example of like the Aeon of Osiris, like the natural outgrowth of that.
A lot of sky god and patriarchal.
Yeah, it's patriarchal. It requires sacrifice and deference of your will to sort of father figures, because I guess what it's all about, like the commandments and the laws,
right.
And what's the Arabic term for things like that are forbidden?
Halal.
Yeah, like halal stuff, or like all the rules in like Deuteronomy and in traditional Judaism. It's all about rules. It's all about suppressing your own will in service of sort of a higher purpose or a higher God, but sacrificing yourself. Living out an ascetic, joyless existence on Earth for some sort of promised reward in the afterlife. And Crowley particularly was like, he really didn't like Christianity, which, being like a gay guy living in Victorian England, I can kind of understand where he's coming from there.
Well, I think the
great.
main problem with Crowley in that respect is that he grew up Plymouth Brethren, which was which was probably one of the most extreme. So like the Plymouth Brethren, that's where you get all this Rapture and Left Behind series stuff. That's where that all comes from. Yeah, all that kind of like, the whole biblical prophecy movement essentially starts with the Plymouth Brethren in England. And his father was, well, I guess he was a brewer, but he was also a Plymouth Brethren minister. And so a lot of the imagery that Crowley used is straight out of, it was kind of like a mutation of the things that he, like the Babylon I mean, that concept, the woman on the dragon, all that stuff, he just pulls right out of Revelation because Plymouth Brethren were so obsessed with Revelation.
Yeah, definitely. He called himself the Beast.
Right.
Saw the Beast as sort of like the creature upon which Babylon will ride.
Yeah.
And sort of he sort of saw the Aeon of Osiris as ending, because I think we're entering like the age of Aquarius or whatever, and he saw this as sort of opening the door to a new Aeon, and specifically the transference of the Book of the Law was, in his opinion, sort of the initiating factor in the creation of the new Aeon, which is the Aeon of Horus, or the child. So it's the Aeon of individuality, of freedom, and in a way, he's not entirely wrong, because you do see, the last several hundred years, you see the birth of like representational democracy, ideas of sort of personal liberty, of course, the Enlightenment and all that kind of stuff happened way before Crowley, but it is, if you want to look at it in an Aeonic sense, I do feel like that is an element of the Aeon of Horus coming into being.
And there's a whole cosmology in Thelema as well I want to talk about, and it primarily derives from ancient Egyptian gods.
Yeah, it does. I wish I knew exactly why that was, because I haven't gotten too much into the Thelemic cosmology stuff.
Because ancient Egypt was cool, man.
Yeah, it's I think it could just be Orientalism. I mean, the basic three sort of deities, I guess you would call them, like Nuit, who is sort of the goddess of the stars, sort of represents the entirety of the cosmos. You have Hadit, who is I'm probably mangling this, but he sort of represents, I guess, like the world. And then like Rahu or Kawit or Horus, who sort of represents, he's like the child or the new Aeon. And there in the Book of the Law is broken up into three big sections. Each section is dictated by one of those entities. So I think like the first one is dictated by Nuit. The second chapter, I believe, is Hadit, and the third is Rahu or Kawit. I could have the second and third backwards, but
these are the ages or the Aeons.
Or the cosmology.
Or the cosmology.
Yeah, they're sort of like the deities of Thelema, if you want to call them that. There's not really like deities, really, but they're sort of the cosmic forces that are considered to be sort of the rulers of the Aeon.
Is it just like time and space and concepts like that, or?
Kind of, yeah, because Nuit is sort of the concept of like space. It goes a little bit beyond that into the what is it? The phrase like the cause or the coup is in the cobs, not the cobs in the coup or something. But it goes into this idea that like you have an immortal spirit that isn't necessarily only you. Like you're sort of part of some kind of greater collective intelligence.
Right.
And you're just like you're like a manifestation of that intelligence. It's very Eastern, I think, in its ideas, and you definitely see that influence, I think, in that work, because it's not really the idea of like Maya or like this world is an illusion kind of thing, but rather like this world is the dream, sort of like this is what we perceive of as reality in our individual lives, and this existence is not an illusion, but I'm struggling to find the right words here.
It's less real.
Yeah, like it's like
what a dream to this is, we are to the next world or another world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely kind of sympathize and relate to that idea.
Well, there's also the concept, and we mentioned this just briefly, but the concept of Babylon, and then also Therion as well.
Yeah, so Crowley is Therion. So he's sort of the prophet of the new Aeon, if you want to see him as that. but he's sort of the herald of the new Aeon. What's interesting is that like Grant's argument against the Aeon of Horus and his argument for like the Aeon of Set is that he claims that Crowley never really spoke the word of the Aeon. He never like kind of like fully initialized it. And that may very well be true.
He just forgot. I mean,
no, more like he didn't finish the work.
He died too soon or something. Yeah.
Yeah, or just like never really finished it. But I mean, you see that in the Book of the Law, because there's this really interesting passage where Aiwass basically tells him like you're going to fail in your what you're doing, and that your successor is going to be the one that actually carries on the work.
Interesting. So did Kenneth Grant see himself as that?
He saw himself as the one that follows. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
So yeah. So it's, you know, who knows who Aiwass actually meant was supposed to be the successor. I don't think that any person.
L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, I think Parsons could have been a successor, but you know, he got blown up.
Yeah. I mean, Parsons, I think, was the one who probably came the closest in just the lifestyle completely of, and what him and Marjorie Cameron and L. Ron Hubbard were. I mean, that was the Babylon working out there in the desert. Yeah.
And you see, Parsons sort of had his own sort of view of like Babylon, and because Crowley himself described Thelema as a solar phallic religion. You see, it's very much a religion developed by a gay guy. Like you see a lot of there's a lot of male focus, I guess.
You mentioned that Crowley was gay. I found that interesting because, like, I mean, I would think of him as more bisexual than anything, because he was an incredible womanizer, and he had just as much a lust for, probably more a lust for women, if anything.
Yeah, I'm just using it as a blanket term, I guess. But yeah, You're right. He'd be more of like a bisexual. That's what we call him today. But he certainly had male lovers and female lovers, and had like a daughter too. So, but you definitely see that sort of phallic influence in like the OTO, especially like in the Gnostic Mass. Like, there's no female saints, and that's a thing that I personally have a problem with, because I was recently doing some research on like Hypatia of Alexandria, and I was like, how is this woman not a Thelemic saint? Because she's like a martyr of like for paganism,
right?
And I like looked it up, and like there's some kind of weaselly statement made by the current outer head, Hymenius Beta. Like, he made some statement about it at a conference in like '94, and there hasn't really been any news about it since. Something about like how the Gnostic Mass is like a male focused like ritual, and that maybe someday a sister will write a female-focused ritual that includes female saints. I'm like, just incorporate them, because Crowley's whole like system, the whole system of Thelemic magic is about the like and sex magic in general is sort of the unification of opposites, of opposite polarities. So why shouldn't the Gnostic Mass be the same? But I don't know. I don't have the right, I guess, unless I want to create a heretical organization to change that. But hey, do what thou wilt, right?
That's it.
So that's a good segue then. I mean, that sex magic is probably the most infamous part of the mythology surrounding the OTO to the public mind.
It's the real juicy stuff.
Yep.
So can you kind of get into that and how Crowley says he discovered it, maybe, or how he first encountered it, and how it became, what role it became in the new OTO in Thelema?
Well, do we want to mention Randolph?
Yeah, definitely.
As well?
That's why I was,
Yeah, I mean, it basically just came from the writings of Paschal Beverly Randolph. And you see, I think you see elements of, I'm trying to remember that other lady's name, the whole comatose lucidity lady.
Erotic comatose lucidity?
Yeah. What is her name? I feel so stupid.
You could just call her that. That's more interesting.
So Crowley was the one who came up with that phrase, but
yeah,
it was based on, so it was kind of based on the writings of Randolph, I'm not gonna be able to find that lady's name. There was a lady in England who was big into sex magic and stuff, and she sort of had this whole organization that practiced the erotic comatose lucidity thing.
What does that mean?
Oh, it's basically you just get someone so horny that they like go into a trance.
Oh, okay.
I mean, okay, so like I'm gonna lay on you guys the ultimate secret of the OTO here. So the ultimate sex magic secret is that like you can power up your spells by jacking off.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
pretty much it.
All right. Yeah.
Everyone already knows that. That's what's so funny about it.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate secret.
Yeah.
And Crowley makes such a big deal out of it. But like Grant Morrison was saying to do that with your sigils in like the 90s. And Donald Michael Craig wrote all about this in Modern Magic.
I think Robert Anton Wilson said the final secret of the Illuminati is hashish and sex magic.
Yeah. It's basically like, sex is like a powerful thing. Orgasms are powerful, like ritual implements. Like the sex magic stuff in the OTO and in general, sex magic in general isn't nearly as crazy as I think people tend to think when they think of that term. You know, they think of something very like weird and racy when it's really more like, you know, you can power up a sigil by like jerking off and looking at it.
Well, how does he break with kind of the tantric ideas and the kind of Eastern indefinitely delaying orgasm things? Because orgasm is an important part of sex magic to Crowley, right?
Yeah, well, okay, so that's where the erotocomatose lucidity thing comes in, because it's sort of tantric in the sense that, like, basically you arouse someone to the point of like almost orgasm, and then you like leave them alone, and then you just keep doing this over and over until someone is just like completely exhausted, and like you kind of like let them get almost asleep, and then you arouse them again, and you keep doing this over and over again until they go into like a trance state. It's kind of funny because you can just do this to yourself by like trying to read in bed and like, you know, kind of nodding off, and then like, because that's how I end up having like out of body experiences and sleep paralysis a lot recently. Is like I figured out that I can do that to myself just by like, you know, looking at my phone until I start like nodding off, and then just forcing myself to stay awake, and then finally going to sleep. But this uses like, I guess, sort of a ritual like sex element to it. But the idea is that you're sort of delaying the actual orgasm in order to produce this state. Now, on the other side of things, like the whole like you know, draw a sigil and then look at it while you jerk it thing, uses the orgasm sort of as the charge, the depth charge, you know. So in that sense, I'm not sure how that sense sort of relates to Tantra, because the orgasm is sort of the means to an end there.
Right.
Now there is like some weird stuff. I think Crowley says that like you should eat the semen or something to preserve the energy.
Sacrifice of a small male child.
Yeah, you're gonna make a sacrifice of a small male child into your mouth.
Okay.
So you know, good luck with that, everyone. It's not something that I am gonna be super into, but I don't know, man. Whatever rocks your boat.
You need to put some like funk music underneath this,
really.
Man.
We might need to do disclaimer at the beginning of this one here.
But yeah, I mean, most of the secret sex magic stuff is literally like stuff that Donald Michael Craig talked about in Modern Magic. And like, well, when did he? This is like in the 80s when that book came out. So a lot of those things have been known about for a long time.
And it seems like the OTO is doing a really good job now of giving credit to P.B. Randolph. But at the beginning, did Crowley initially really give the credit as due?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but knowing how egotistical Crowley was, probably not. I know Blavatsky hated P.B. Randolph.
Oh, yeah.
Like she used some choice racial slurs to refer to him when he died.
And then there's even the rumor that he was shooting at her at her image when he shot himself supposedly, and that she caused the bullet to turn around and hit him. There's all kinds of weird shit.
Yeah, I'm sure she would love people to believe that.
Yeah, and interesting. Like he was here in Nashville too.
Yeah, we actually we found through our a guest we had, P.D. Newman, one of his writings that I guess Randolph created the short-lived Brotherhood of Euless here in post-Civil War Nashville, but they only stayed a year. Probably got ran off by racists, but pretty interesting.
Yeah. It is wild when you think about it, man. Like, how did a black man in sort of racist post-Civil War deep American South, how was he doing like sex magic and forming these like esoteric brotherhoods and stuff and not like getting immediately killed?
Well,
like,
I think it wasn't deep enough south, really. That's what it is. This was this was pretty strong Union occupation, and know it was, I think.
When was he here?
I think 74.
Okay.
1874.
Democrats would have been back in control by then in Tennessee, but
but still, I think it would have been safer here than say like further south.
Yeah, Mississippi, something like that, right?
And then
it's still wild. I mean, he really is a person that really deserves like his own biopic or miniseries or something, because he's a character that's not really that well known in the occult world.
Yeah, and like that Robert Anton Wilson quote I used, he was also a marijuana importer.
Mm-hmm. I think we owe a lot of the modern magical tradition to the work of P.B. Randolph, and it's something that has gotten sort of left behind. I mean, I don't know what's going to change that, but I'm glad that more people know who he is now.
It does seem like there's a whole lot more scholarly focus, and like I said, with all the stuff I was encountering from official OTO stuff about him, it seems like everyone is really trying to make good and really give credit where it's due.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about the Kabbalah in association with Thelema. Because I read a few years ago. I read a book, the graphic novel series on Promethea, which is Alan Moore. Have you ever read that?
Oh, I think I have. I read his whole like Lovecraft cycle.
Okay.
Of comics.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about Hypatia, because that's exactly where it actually begins, was like with the murder of Hypatia. But Promethea basically is like more really laying out all his occult philosophy, which is really steeped in Crowley, and I guess steeped in Thelema too. But the Kabbalah really has quite an interesting role in that. So what's all the different levels of Kabbalah, and what's the Thelemic stance on all that stuff?
I mean, the Kabbalah is pretty intrinsically tied to Western esotericism.
Yeah.
Like we use, it's probably most of the stuff that I do that involves Kabbalah and involves like the Sephiroth probably comes from Golden Dawn more than it does Thelema. But I think that anybody who is a Western occultist in this day and age will probably do work that involves the Kabbalah. I think it's a useful way to represent not only like sort of the universe, but the human mind. But it's also just, we use it in different rituals, like when we conjure specific angels, like you can conjure the like angel of the Sephiroth that you're trying to use, or you're trying to like sort of get the energies of. There's also the element of path working that's done in some OTO lodges, and I think the OTA, Runion's OTA, also does this, where you travel through the 22 paths of the Tree of Life,
right?
Sort of through active imagination and using the tarot associations, because that's the other thing. Like you have tarot associations that go along with the paths of the Tree of Life as well.
And that's considered the Western esoteric Kabbalah, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between, I think, like Jewish Kabbalah, like actual Jewish Kabbalah, and Western esoteric Kabbalah. I mean, there's a whole history there that I'm not super familiar with. I couldn't really speak with authority about. But from what I understand, like Western esoteric Kabbalah is quite different than what we like what a Jewish person would think of as Kabbalah.
Right, and it has all those associations with the tarot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All the different paths in the Sephiro are united to both zodiacal and tarot.
Yeah, that's a big part of Promethea as well. There's a lot of association with tarot, and there's and with Kabbalah, and there's also this concept in here, with Crowley's concept of crossing the abyss.
Yeah, it's sort of the empty space between, what is the names of those spheres? It's like Kether and Chesed, I think. I'm a terrible Kabbalist.
Is it Tiferath? I'm looking at a picture of it.
I've got a pretty rad Golden Dawn and Enochian magic book here.
Kether is the first level. Tiferath is the sixth, and there is an empty space between those two, which looks like somehow it's called Dath, Daath.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a diagram now, and I can't just get a normal diagram. Google has to show me all of this like weird crap. Yeah. So it's between Kether and Tiferath. So you have sort of this empty space there, and that is what is referred to sort of as the abyss in the AA system. It's sort of what you like doing path working. You have to sort of do a ritual to cross that abyss. And at least in Crowley's idea, like what lives in that abyss is, the demon Choronzon. And if you fail to cross the abyss, you are kind of utterly destroyed. What that means, I don't know, maybe you go insane or something. But that if you're able to cross the abyss successfully, then you have like basically become like a true magician.
Is it that you've kind of really come into being incarnated? Like you're coming into reality further?
I think the way it's thought is that it's in order to sort of realize, so this ties into the whole idea of like the holy guardian angel. So in order to kind of make contact with your HGA or fully realize your HGA, you have to cross the abyss, because it's kind of what separates you from the heavens, if that makes sense. Like it's sort of the barrier between the earthly realms and sort of the heavenly realms, and what lies like beyond the tree of life, which is like if you're looking at a diagram that's like Ein Sof, or light without end. So yeah, it's sort of like, it's almost like an initiatory kind of thing. Like you have to be able to cross the abyss to become fully realized.
Is that associated with Crowley's concept about facing demons and to get to, I guess, the divine, I suppose? I don't...
Yeah, I guess it's the idea that Choronzon or like whatever's in the abyss is sort of the dweller on the threshold. It's like a test that's put before someone. Yeah. That prevents them from self-actualizing until they're able to face it. And I mean, you could see this in a purely metaphorical sense in like what people have to go through just in their own lives. Like we all have, demons that are, traumas or things from our past that we have to eventually deal with, or we'll never be able to like move on with our lives. Right. And you could see like the crossing of the abyss is sort of the magical version of that.
So there's almost kind of like there's almost like a psychological aspect to all this stuff then.
Yeah, there is. And Crowley goes in Crowley's Goetia, he makes this statement that like all the demons in the Goetia are sort of aspects of the human brain or psychology, which he knows better than to say that. So I've never really been able to understand why he said that in that, because that's, I mean, anybody who's worked with him knows that isn't true. You can look at sort of the path working and stuff that happens on the Tree of Life in sort of like this Jungian, like psychological sense. But I also sort of hesitate in that regard, because I think there is like a real external reality to the things you do in like a magical tradition. Like it isn't necessarily all just in your head. And that I was going to bring up the idea of the Cliff-Oth, or sort of the reverse tree, which is something that like Kenneth Grant goes into a lot. But this idea that as sort of a twisted reflection of the Tree of Life, you have the Cliff-Oth, which is sort of like instead of like an angel being in charge of each sphere, there's like a demon in charge of each sphere, and it sort of exists as the reflection of the goodness of the world that is represented by the tree of life. And his idea was that you can travel to the Qliphoth through what he called the tunnels of Set, which are kind of like tunnels in that sort of negative space of Doth that lead into the Qliphoth. And that's sort of where like you see this reflected in like Twin Peaks, because Twin Peaks is basically like one long Kenneth Grant fan fiction TV series.
I finally got done with the new series, man. It was after what you told us before, man. It was it all made sense.
Yeah, it really is.
And I've been reading some Kenneth Grant too, so it was like, wow.
Yeah, it's literally just Kenneth Grant, like the TV show, and it's sort of this idea that like the demons and evil spirits and stuff, kind of trans-Saturnian entities, if you want to call them that, come from like the Qliphoth. They're sort of the reverse of the tree.
And somehow Flannel Man is involved with all this. I'm not quite sure. How the flannel lumberjacks are, and the Trinity explosion, and
well, and then you touched on earlier the your HGA, the Holy Guardian Angel. What's the role of that? Because that's pretty important to Thelema, isn't it? That you find your Holy Guardian Angel.
Yeah, that's primarily. I would say that's probably, if you're going to want to be a magician, that's your first big quest, is to make contact with your HGA, gain the knowledge and conversation of your HGA. Now, what the HGA is, I think you're going to find a lot of opinions on that. You can kind of see it as a reflection of your higher self, or a view in like a perfected state, or you can literally just see it as, literally like your own personal spirit. That is like sort of given to you by the Lord of the universe to kind of help you along and help you mature as a human being and fully realize your own self. I think, the whole phrase guardian angel, I think, is wrapped up in a lot of, especially like pop culture stuff from the 90s. But it's not entirely wrong. I mean, I feel like sometimes when maybe you have a little flash of intuition, or you hear a little voice that tells you, maybe you should take this other road, and then you avoid a car accident or something because of that. That very well could possibly be your HGA kind of whispering over your ear, just like in a Hallmark original movie.
Yeah, I like the idea personally, and I'm not usually the one to say, yeah, that's what it was, but usually, when I've really skirted some potential tragedies, family members usually, use that, and I'm not going to reject it all the way.
Yeah, no, I think it's a useful way to think about it. I think you can think about your HGA in whatever way you want, but the idea isn't necessarily a Christian or even a Jewish one. It's something that goes back to the idea of like your own sort of personal genius. I think it goes back to like sort of Greek ideas. And there's like different processes for contacting your HGA. One of them is like the Abramelin operation, which is in the Book of Abramelin. It's a very lengthy and involved procedure that takes like 13 months or something to complete. You have to rent like a special house for it that has like windows in specific places.
Yeah, this is what is in A Dark Song, the film, the movie.
Yeah, they use the term Abramelin in that. What they're actually doing in that movie isn't anything like the Abramelin, but but I guess the idea of it is sort of similar. The spirit of it is captured. The idea that you're basically going to spend the next year of your life like in intense prayer and ritual. Now, and I really do love that movie, and I love the depiction at the end. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but the ending is incredible. Yeah, it captures a lot of that same, and there's certain parts of that movie that really capture the feelings that come along with doing ritual. So I thought it was very good in that regard. But there's different ways of doing it. Like some people do the Abramelin. Like Aaron Leach is pretty famous online for apparently doing the whole Abramelin and getting in contact with his HGA that way. There are other people, like you can kind of see Aiwass as Crowley's HGA, and Crowley famously didn't complete the Abramelin. The whole reason he rented Boleskine House in Loch Ness was to do the Abramelin. He got like halfway through it and gave up. But hey, he still made contact with Aiwass, so worked out. I don't think you have to do the Abramelin. I don't think that's the only way to contact your HGA. But I don't know. I'll have to report back to you guys on this because I'm in the process of doing this right now myself.
Doing the Abramelin?
Not the Abramelin, but like the HGA work.
Okay.
So there's a series of steps that I'm following based on advice from various people. One from my mentor, which basically involves like it's important to first figure out your HGA's name. And Scott's method that he taught me was a divinatory method, where basically you do a series of rituals and then you draw cards from the top of a tarot deck that you've shuffled. And if the first card you get is a major arcana or trump card, you keep going. If you get another trump card, you keep going. And you just keep going as long as you have trump cards until you hit a pip card. And the idea is that the letters that sort of, because each major arcana has a Hebrew letter associated with it. According, like if you look through Crowley's 777, it has all the associations. And then you can look at those Hebrew letters and say, okay, well these make up the name of my HGA. So, and then being able to draw at least three, you need at least three. If you get like say 2 trump cards and then you hit a pip card, you use the pip card as an indication of like what is standing in your way, like what's preventing you from contacting your HGA.
So if I pull 2 cards, they're a trump card, and then I pull and I guess the pip, you mean the minor arcana? Yeah,
the minor. So like 3 of swords or something.
Yeah. So if you keep pulling the trump card, how many do you pull before you know the name? How do you derive the name?
You need at least 3.
At least 3.
And then you basically just go look up the Hebrew letter that goes along with that card.
And that's from the number of the card?
Yeah, it's from the number of the card. And so you use basically those Hebrew letters to get the name. So I accomplished this successfully. It's actually surprisingly unlikely to get 3 major arcana in a row.
Okay.
Because
it seems like I've heard this somewhere before, but I can't place it. I don't know if you told me this.
I might have told you at Paramania.
Okay.
Like I hadn't successfully done it yet at Paramania, but when I got back, I just woke up one morning and I felt this really strong urge to pull 3 tarot cards, and I was like, I just on a whim decided I feel like I should really pull 3 tarot cards. I shuffled my deck, I pulled 3 cards, and it was 3 trump cards, and I didn't even think about it at first. I was like just doing a reading based on those 3 cards.
So what did you pull?
Can't tell you.
You can't tell me. Okay.
I have to kill you. No, I don't know. I'm a little superstitious about it. I actually don't know. Some people say it doesn't matter. My mentor personally advises me against giving the name of my HGA. Says keep it to yourself.
Okay. So,
but I will tell you some interesting elements around it, and if somebody can deduce it from that, then whatever. But the 3 cards I pulled, I didn't even realize it at first, and then I was like, oh, holy crap, these are 3 trump cards. And I wasn't even meaning to do it, and I was like, I pulled them, so I figured out the name based on those 3 trump cards, and I looked at like the like what those Hebrew letters meant, and looked at the name. And then I realized that the name was actually referring to a specific order of angels, like, the different orders of angels, like dominion, thrones, whatever. Like, it was in the name, like what order it belonged to. And I was like, wow, that's weird. And then I looked up the name in some of my grimoires, and I found its name in, I think, the Hygromantia. As like, and it was an angel of a specific season, and it happened to be the beginning of that season when I pulled those 3 cards. and see it all. And then like I did the gematria on the name, and it came up interesting. It was like everything around it, everything around the name that I pulled had interesting synchronicities. And that's how I sort of knew. I was like, okay, that's the name. That's what its name is. And so now I've been trying to do the work of like actually getting it on the phone, which is the tough part. So what's been advised for me to do is kind of like do daily recitations of the headless rite, or what I think Crowley and Mathers refer to as the bornless ritual. Mm-hmm. And like kind of solar work. So yeah, it just involves like a daily ritual practice, and then, petitions for it to either appear to me in a crystal or appear to me in a dream or something, just to make contact with me. So far, nothing that I can say, nothing dramatic has occurred. But I'm also not really sure what to expect, because some people talk about it like they're hearing a voice in their head, like that's separate from their own internal monologue, like clear as day, as if there was somebody standing behind you and talking into your ear. I haven't heard that. I've been doing some crystal gazing because I don't know. I think I showed you guys in the Where Did the Road Go Slack some of the implements I've been working on. So I've been building sort of the full ritual apparatus for the drawing spirits into crystals operation, and that is part of the apparatus that I'm attempting to use for my HGA contacts.
Let's talk a little bit about some of these holidays.
Okay.
That are important in Thelema, and which I understand that also tonight you were supposed to be involved in like a marking of the astrological sign of Leo.
Yeah, it's a thing that Scott Stenwick does. It's a ritual called the Via Solis elixir ritual that he wrote. He created it. So it's not anything that you're going to find in any book. But it is all available. The text of all these rituals is available via his website, which is at is it Anael? Yeah, ananael.blogspot.com. It's ANANAEL.blogspot.com. But he's actually got the Via Solis Leo Elixir Rite Year 3 article up from yesterday. He put it up on Monday. But basically, when it changes over into the new zodiac sign, so it just changed over into Leo about a week ago, we do a ritual where we conjure the angel of the zodiac that corresponds with the zodiac sign that's currently in play, and we ask them to enchant an elixir, so usually like a cup of wine, with the specific energies or occult virtues of that zodiac sign. So like for Scorpio, it's necromancy and the ability to speak with spirits. I think for others, it's like, the ability to travel out of body. There's another that's like practical enchantment. These are all the powers that I think are pulled from 777, or maybe it's one of Crowley's books. I think it's in 777 in the tables. But yeah, it's a ritual that doesn't, like I said, you're not going to find it in any book. It's kind of Scott's own thing, but it's very cool, and it's like a group ritual. So usually there's at least 4 or 5 people. Sometimes we've had groups as big as like 15, and everyone kind of does it together. We all take a drink from the cup, and I've felt some pretty dramatic things during these rituals. Like in particular, I think the Virgo one that we did last year, there was a lot of energy in that ritual. Like I felt like I was going to pass out at certain points because of how intense it was. And in some others, like when we did the Pisces ritual earlier this year, I probably had the strongest physical sensations of like an angel being there that I've ever felt. So the angel of Pisces is Amnitziel. And there was a point when we were right after we did the conjuration where we're all kind of standing around and, saying the angel's name and and trying to conjure them. When I got this really strong sensation of like someone being in the room, like outside of the circle, like, you know, that I couldn't see. And I actually felt something brush up against my back. And I could like track it with my eyes, like walking around us, like pacing around the circle. And it was like I couldn't see anything, but, you know, it's like I could tell it was there. You know, I could tell exactly where it was standing. And it felt very warm and like friendly. It was really super interesting. And I felt some similar things during other ones. It's really odd. I don't know if have you ever seen the movie Wings of Desire?
No, I've heard you mention it though recently.
Yeah, so it's a German film that's kind of about like angels and stuff. The Nick Cage movie City of Angels from the 90s was a remake of this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that because I heard you mention that on Where to the Rodeo recently, and I thought that sounds a lot like the I can't remember the name of that movie.
Yeah, City of Angels.
City of Angels, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a part in Wings of Desire where one of the characters can tell, because people can't normally see the angels unless they're dying. But there's a scene where a character can sort of sense that he's there, and he's like, and he says, you know, like, you know, hey friend, like I can tell you're there. I can't see you, but I know you're there. And that's sort of the same way I felt, you know, like I couldn't see it, but it's just like you just know something's standing there. It's very, very interesting. But it's not necessarily a thelemic thing, like I mentioned before. For Thelema, you know, kind of the big dates are like the equinoxes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, like when I was in London during the spring equinox, I actually met up with some OTO people from the lodge there, from MF Lodge. And we like all went out to a bar and had dinner, and it was a lot of fun. Usually they have some sort of like feasting to celebrate the equinoxes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I guess I kind of want to get into what's some of the lasting cultural impact in I know there was this period where after Crowley things were kind of get sorted back out. Things did kind of get sorted back out to a degree, and then of course the whole psychedelic revolution happened, and this kind of other magical revival on into the 70s and 80s with the industrial culture and Temple of Psychic Youth and other things like that, where you still have this lasting impact of Crowley and the OTO's work. I guess if you could just like sum up some of that, and what do you think the lasting impact for the future is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it on the edges. I think the biggest impact of Crowley's work and sort of his associates was probably Gerald Gardner's Wicca movement. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, when people think of magic, like generally in today's, you know, when a normie talks about magic, they're probably thinking about Wicca. They may even refer to it as like Wicca or whatever, which if people don't know, is basically a system that was just created by Gerald Gardner, who was a colleague of Crowley's, and it's based on a lot of material Crowley gave Gardner to work with. So a lot of the stuff in Wicca has direct parallels with like Golden Dawn magic. Gardner made it his own in some ways, like we said, you know, in the whole and Duno. The thing about it though, it's very like neutered. Like there's the whole idea of the threefold law, right? And it's like, let me tell you guys, there's no such thing as a threefold law. Yeah, like it doesn't exist. Okay, like if you need to curse somebody, you can curse somebody. Nothing's gonna happen to you. But I think I'd honestly say, like, as far as cultural things go, like you mentioned, like Psychic Youth, I think you see elements of Crowley in culture, like, you know, with the Beatles and stuff, but I still feel like the biggest impact was in Wicca and how much it was a part of the sort of magical landscape of the 90s, where it was kind of when I grew up.
Yeah, that was a huge thing, Ben. Yeah, I remember. Mm-hmm.
And then later, it's actually interesting, like right now there's actually a TV show on CBS all about Jack Parsons, and it includes like scenes and stuff that are supposed to be at like the Agape Lodge. it heavily incorporates like the OTO into it, and it's really wild to hear someone on TV say, you know, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law."
Wow.
I mean, it's on, I say TV, it's on like CBS All Access, like their
Right.
app. But
Well, I think more and more people are just like, I think they're just like us, you know, these screenwriters in Hollywood. They're more familiar with this stuff now because so many books
Yeah.
have been written about it, and so it's just so much more out in the open, I think, now than it ever has been. And there's really just been lately this kind of low-key kind of occult revival that has gone on, where it's just becoming more and more, I think, acceptable.
yeah, I think that, yeah, you're totally right about there being sort of a magical revival going on right now. Probably is a backlash. It's sort of, I think, the wave of maybe I'm off base here, but like if you think about the satanic panic stuff that was going on
Yeah.
in the 80s and early 90s, I feel like the current revival, occult revival going on, is like the ultimate result of all that. Because I think that satanic panic stuff spread the ideas
Yes.
of like occultism more than it prevented anything, because it just made people curious. So.
Right. Yeah, there's this pastor out there that all he does is just constantly talk about Crowley and all his stuff.
Oh wow.
Just
I'm
like
sure there's gonna be some young Thelemites made from those congregations.
Right.
Yeah.
He's always talking about Allister Crowley, a famed occultist, Allister Crowley. That's how he talks. And so it's like, you just like in your mind all the time. It just became like this joke whenever we'd listen to it at work, you know, that we'd always talk about famed occultist Allister Crowley, and it's just so breathy, you know. But I think honestly too, and this will sound really Christian panicky of me, but I honestly think like the Harry Potter stuff actually had something to do with some of this stuff too, because it made that. I mean, you got some really heady concepts in some of those books in those movies. Especially like the Philosopher's Stone.
Magic.
Yeah.
I think it made people curious about magic.
Well, that was
Mm-hmm.
a big thing with like the religious right. It was just like, Harry Potter is going to take your kids. Well, I think it might have. I mean, you know, that's
to an extent, yeah. But that's the thing, though. When you forbid stuff, or you warn people about it, all you do is you give it power. You give it allure and mystique.
Right. If they really wanted to do it, they would just. If they really wanted their kids to be Christian, they would just pretend to not be. And like smoke and drink openly, and just like smoke weed, and just like their kids will be and talk about like, you know, hey, I'm gonna go out and have lots of sex and worship Satan, and then their kids will be Christian, you know, like that's it's reverse psychology, man. Just rebellion against what your parents do.
Yeah, no, I actually heard somebody making a joke about that on a podcast the other day, where they were like, all of these like kind of woke parents now who are like going to try to raise their kids gay, or like raise their kids like, you know, to try to make them like like that, you know, and then like all of those kids are just going to become like huge Republicans.
I've seen
a
it
backlash.
I've seen it firsthand. I know this guy whose dad was like super cool hippie Buddhist guy, and now he's like super alt-right, like fringy edgelord, like totally opposite.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, this goes back so far though, because like a lot of the modern grimoire tradition, especially the Goetia, the Lemegeton in general, a lot of the stuff in there comes from Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, which was originally written as a thing to discourage people from doing magic.
Yeah.
It was supposed to like kind of like lay out how silly and ridiculous and untrue magic was.
Well, my own journey, I mean, I really got into the occult. My first exposure was really in this kind of the 90s conspiratorial world and anti-Masonic New World Order mumbo jumbo. I mean, that's really where I like first learned what the OTO was, what this was, what that was, what, you know. And so I think it's a path that can lead you, to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, there's an idea, I think, in some of this stuff where if you know about like just like the concept of like Freemasonry, like the whole idea of the Cowan, you know, like if you know about it, then you are one of the illuminated ones yourself, because you know somewhat of the inner workings.
Yeah. I mean, there's no real secrets.
Even
anymore.
if you're ostensibly speaking against it, you still know it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can, and that's the thing. There are no real secrets in the internet age. Like, if you're really curious about what happens during the OTO initiations, you can go find all of the documents online. Like, I haven't looked at them because I want to be surprised when I go through the initiation. It doesn't seem like a whole lot of fun if I know what's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
But you can find it all, and I'm sure you can find Masonic texts, and you can figure out, like, you know, what happens in Masonic initiations and stuff. It's like there are no more secrets.
Right.
The only secrets would be more personalized things that you actually experience when you go through these.
You can get
Exactly.
morals and dogma on the internet.
Things that are probably less, you know, that you really can't write about. Things that maybe don't relate too well to language and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Going through it is going to be leagues different than just reading about it.
Wren, in the OTO seal, what's the significance of the dove?
You know, actually, my girlfriend asked the same question to Harper Feist a couple weeks ago when Lon Cat was in town. And I can't remember what she said.
Well, what's all in the seal?
Well, it's got
The shape of it is like what is that called exactly? It's like the intersection of two circles. What is that called, Adam?
Like the Venn diagram shape? Is that
Yeah,
or an ellipse?
Yeah, is that what it is? Is there a significance to that first? Like,
Well, I can tell you kind of what it looks like a little bit.
yeah. I mean, of course.
it does have quite a vaginal sort of look to it.
I let you say it.
I mean, I guess, like, okay, so this would be my interpretation of it. Like, okay, so you've got, like, the rosy cross at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
You've got, like, a rose and a cross. So
Right.
you've got the
In a cup,
Rosicrucian
right?
element there. Yep. And then you have sort of a dove, which, in my view, would sort of represent, like, purity, or maybe sort of, like, goodwill.
Or like spirit descending into matter.
Spirit descending, yeah. And then you have, you know, the Eye of Horus up above, sort of probably, you know, representing the Aeon of Horus, and Thelema is sort of the
Dude,
the law of the Aeon of Horus.
that's totally a vagina, bro. The whole thing. Like,
Oh, yeah.
the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, you gotta have-
I
you gotta have somewhere.
just looking at it, I'm just like,
So the eye is another part. Yeah.
At the very
Is that the
top?
top?
Yeah, that's another top. That's
eye?
another part there. Yeah. Not to
Well, I mean, it's cool though with this stuff because Crowley was so so sex positive.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good way to put it.
You look at Crowley's personal seal too. You know, it's like the 666 thing where it's got the Star of Babylon, and it's got what looks like 3 circles and like a moon and the sun, like symbols for the moon and the sun. But if you really look at it, you realize what you're looking at is like a dick and balls. Like looking at
I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and his tarot deck is like really. There's a lot of pornographic stuff in his tarot deck.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people take Crowley too seriously. I mean, the guy didn't even take
agree.
himself that seriously.
I agree. Yeah.
You know, like he loved riling people up. You know, he was like kind of like a first internet troll. You know, like he really just loved like triggering.
He was a trickster. Yeah.
And talking about that pastor that I was telling you about that just rails against Crowley and like turns him into like the most evil man that ever lived. Like he's worse than Hitler or Stalin. You know, these guys that actually did kill millions of people, but somehow Crowley, you know, he's really, to me, Crowley was like his best publicist. Everything he did was the greatest thing ever, but he was really just kind of a charlatan. And he had a kind of a towards the end. I mean, you know, he was just kind of a sad sack, really. He died a heroin addict.
Yeah,
well,
I mean
was
the
from
drug
health
addiction
problems, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't he self-medicating for actual health reasons too?
Yeah, as far as I understand, but
All
I
the
think he did.
syphilis, probably. That he.
I think he did actually have like issues with addiction and stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, he's a
Diary
he's
of a
human,
drug fiend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you know, I see Crowley as like a human figure. You know, he's got problems and he's problematic and he says some crappy things in some of his works.
Yeah.
He's not the Superman. He's just a human being with his own flaws. And I don't think he was so much a charlatan in the sense that like he was, I think, a skilled and like very knowledgeable magician. When he talks about his goetic work, like I believe that he experienced what he experienced. I do think he was quite talented. And, like the Book of the Law is, I see it as a really inspired text. So I think Crowley left like a really valuable legacy to Western occultism. And like, I definitely respect him for that. And, even in Thelema, it's not like people revere him as like a saint or a prophet or whatever.
Sure.
Like we crack jokes about Crowley at the lodge, he's like, I think you gotta, the man had a sense of humor. He's really funny. Like if you read his personal letters and stuff, he's hilarious. He's kind of like very catty and, and he would say things like you said before, like making a sacrifice of a like perfect male child, like every single day for like the past year or whatever. He's really just making a joke about like jerking off, and it's like he would include stuff like that because he knew that hysterical people would read it and would like totally misinterpret what he was talking about because he's like, and not get that he's making a joke and then raise hell about it. And that only spread his fame and his, infame. Yeah.
Well, I mean, whatever you think about him, he was an iconoclast, and he did really serve as a catalyst for dawning of a new age, however you want to see that, good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. And if you need any like good reason for liking Crowley, just take it that William Butler Yeats hated Crowley. Mm-hmm. He didn't want him to be a member of the Golden Dawn. Right. And Yeats was a fascist and a creep. So anyone that Yeats didn't like, you can probably count on being like pretty cool, and you would way rather like hang out with them than hang out with Yeats.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, Wren. Let's tell everybody where the people can find you, and if they want to find out about their local OTO lodge.
Yeah, so you can find me at liminalroom.com. I run a blog there. And if you're interested in the OTO, if you live in Minneapolis or in the Twin Cities area, come out to the ritual night every Tuesday. Just look up Leaping Laughter Oasis. It's pretty easy to find. Otherwise, just Google local OTO lodge. I think the Grand U.S. Lodge website has a listing of all the U.S. lodges. And, I can't vouch for I think every lodge is kind of different. Some lodges are more focused on like different things, probably just depending on who runs the lodge. I know when I look at calendars for some of the lodges, like the one in Atlanta, like it doesn't seem nearly as busy as Leaping Laughter does. But again, that's probably a consequence of Leaping Laughter having a lot of like kind of practicing magicians as members. So like, again, I can't vouch for the quality of your local OTO lodge, but there might be some cool people there. And if you're just looking for someone to talk to about, if you like the occult, if you want to learn magic, or you just want somebody to talk to about this stuff that won't think you're insane or a Satan worshiper, go check out your local OTO lodge, because there are probably people there who are friendly and will love to have conversations with you about this kind of stuff.
Okay, excellent.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, Wren, stay on the line. We always love having you on, man. But stay on the line for us. So we're going to close this section out, and we'll be back to close out the show as usual on Conspirinormal.
If you want your HR team to hire top talent for your company, tell them about ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience, and actively invites them to apply to your company's job posts, so you get qualified candidates fast. It's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. This rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Conspirinormal. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Conspirinormal. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
All right. That was a great interview with Wren Collier.
It's absolutely epic.
Yeah, we always love having Wren on. He's one of our favorite guests. And we did another, what was that, 45 minutes to an hour?
Yeah.
Patreon show?
Where Adam gets a little open.
Yeah, I got a little personal in this one. I don't normally talk about my personal life, but I got a little more personal in this Patreon episode.
We got a magical perspective of it.
Yeah, we did, and my mind is pretty blown right now. So if you want to hear that, you need to go to Patreon.com/Conspirinormal, and you can join for as little as $1. Yes, that's $1, not $1, but $1. As I've said many times before. So any insights to any things we discussed with Wren that you found particularly interesting?
Everything was just real interesting. I mean, we really got really deep in an overview of just not only OTO and Crowley, but magic in general. And it was in magic and the history of a lot of this stuff. And man, just all over the place. It was epic.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of that stuff is some of it's really hard to get my mind around, and we definitely did not cover everything. I mean, there was plenty of stuff that we could have also talked about, and we got a little more into in the Patreon segment. And not only did I get personal, but we got a little more into mysticism and synchronicity and the role that plays and how that's a part of magic.
Yeah,
and basically it revolves around this angel summoning ritual that I participated in Paramania, and some of the things that followed along in my life from there. So if you want to listen to that, that's it on our Patreon. So guys, we announced last week that we have the Strange Realities Conference coming up on October 19th.
Strange Realities.
And we will say that we have a good cast of characters that are going to be there. We got Tim Banal, Timothy Renner, Joshua Cutchin, Guy Malone, Mark Anthony Wyatt. I've actually added him as well, and our good friend Joe is going to be presenting.
Awesome.
So that's going on October 19th, and you can get your tickets at strangerealitiesconference.com, and we'd love to see you there, guys. It's only $30, but at the door it's $40. Yeah. So using a little bit of that psychology on you guys to get to get to the cheapest thing that you will have to pay to come down here to Nashville to be with us is to actually get into the door.
You're sitting there listening to Conspirinormal, and you may just absentmindedly be doing the dishes or hanging out, and you may feel pretty good and relaxed, and then you might get on your computer or your cell phone, and you may find yourself going to strangerealitiesconference.com. Then you may even find yourself purchasing 1 or 2 or 3 tickets pre-sale at only $30.
I mean, if you got a family, $30.
Bring the whole family.
If you got a family, bring the whole family.
We will not engage in explicit sex magic discussions in the panels, I don't think, this time.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Wren may try to be there, but I don't know if we're going to talk about that or not. But hey, come on, guys! UFOs, aliens. We got Tim Banal talking about flat Earth. You guys
find out how to see ghosts.
How to see ghosts? Yeah, that too. We got. And also I'm gonna give somewhat of a presentation. I don't know about what yet, but it's gonna happen. So if you guys and a live podcast recording,
that
we're gonna do. So
the first live interactive Conspirinormal podcast.
All right, guys. So come join us. Come party with us in Nashville, October 19th, 2019.
strangerealitiesconference.com.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We're going to close out the show. Next time, we're going to do, I believe, I'm not quite sure yet. I don't know if this is going to be the next show or the show after. But because I'm trying to reschedule Dr. Heather Lynn, because we were supposed to have her come on. But we're gonna do this woke in the 90s roundtable, and I've got Aaron Gullius, Red Pill Junkie, and Adam Gorightly gonna be here for that.
Hashtag woke in the 90s.
Hashtag woke in the 90s.
That was my idea.
Yeah, I don't quite know what we're gonna do, but it'll probably be a grab bag. And I'm really loving this, man. Like we have a table. We have you know, like we can put our computer, our laptops on it. We got like Mr. Easy Street candle in the middle here. You know, I mean, and other assorted items, and the Book of the Law sitting right here.
Yeah, we're real podcasters. We got a table.
Yeah, real podcasters have tables.
We're not doing the couch thing anymore.
No, not falling asleep on the couch. You know, not holding a beer anymore. This is real, true professional podcasting, guys. So, thank you so much, guys, for listening, and we'll be back next week on Conspirinormal. StrangeRealitiesConference.com.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal